A smartphone glows on the coffee table in a darkened room, buzzing silently. You watch the screen light up with a familiar name. You do not reach for it. It is not that you do not care about the person calling. It is that the thought of processing their voice feels physically impossible right now. You know exactly what tone they will use. You know the hidden expectations beneath their words. From the outside, this looks like you are suddenly acting cold. People say you have a habit of cutting others off without warning. But this sudden isolation is not an act of cruelty. It is an act of biological survival. Why does the mind do this? Why does it choose total isolation over human connection? When the mind is forced to track too much invisible data, it eventually trips a circuit breaker. Researchers in trauma psychology have started calling this cognitive over-recruitment. It is a defining feature of traumatic intelligence. Your brain is not simply participating in a social interaction. It is running a massive, invisible background program. And when that program consumes all available memory, the system initiates a hard shutdown. Think about what happens when you enter a crowded space. Most people just see faces, hear background noise, and go about their evening. You immediately feel the atmospheric pressure of the room. Your nervous system performs an involuntary, high-speed sweep of the environment. You notice who is silently tense, who is pretending to be happy, and who is carrying unspoken anger. This adaptive scanning kept you safe when you were younger. It allowed you to predict the emotional weather before the storm hit. But reading a room this deeply requires massive amounts of neurological energy. You are essentially doing the emotional labor of 10 people just by standing near the doorway. And your brain is doing this without your permission. This constant processing bleeds into every single conversation you have. You find yourself anticipating what someone needs before they even finish their sentence. You reflexively adjust your posture, your tone, and your vocabulary to make them feel perfectly comfortable. This is a form of hyperempathy. Your brain was trained to monitor the comfort of others because an unpredictable adult meant an unsafe environment. You became an expert at smoothing out the friction in the room. But the same mechanism that makes you perfectly adaptable is what slowly erases your own shape. You bend and mold to fit the space until you forget what you look like standing up straight. You leave the interaction completely drained, having spent hours playing a character designed purely to maintain the peace. This is why socializing does not just make you feel tired, it makes you feel physically ill. The crash that follows a social event is profound and heavy. Your muscles ache. Your jaw is tight. Your eyes feel heavy, yet your mind continues to race. Other people call this being a typical introvert, but introversion is simply a preference for quiet environments. What you experience is severe nervous system fatigue. You have spent hours in a state of high alert, suppressing your own needs to monitor the threat level of the group. When you finally get home, your body collapses not from a lack of social battery, but from the sudden drop in adrenaline. Even when you are entirely alone in a safe place, the data processing rarely stops. You catch yourself mentally rehearsing conversations that have not happened yet. You map out every possible branch of dialogue, every potential conflict, and every necessary escape route. This is predictive processing pushed to its absolute limit. Your mind operates under the belief that if it can perfectly predict the future, it can prevent you from being hurt. So you spend your free time running endless simulations of disaster. This means you are never actually resting. You are just preparing for the next interaction, analyzing variables until your head throbs. You have probably been told that you are too guarded. People say you are difficult to reach, or that you push people away when they get too close. Society makes you feel like your need for distance is a toxic character flaw. But back when you learned that peace was only possible when you were completely alone, you built this mechanism. You did not choose to be this way out of malice. You built a fortress because the open field was simply too dangerous. This is the moment you must look at your isolation differently. You are not cutting people off because you are a broken, defective human being. You are shutting down the grid because your mind is fiercely protecting its core. Not toxicity. Architecture. Because of this architecture, your threat detection systems are incredibly sensitive. You notice the exact moment a friend's text message lacks its usual warmth. You hear the microscopic drop in a partner's voice before they even realize they are upset. But this creates an agonizing dynamic. You pull away because you sense a shift, and they accuse you of being distant for no reason. You are punished for seeing what is already there. That glowing screen on the table isn't just an unanswered call. It is a demand for a resource your nervous system has already depleted. Eventually, the friction becomes too much to bear. You do not throw a tantrum. You do not demand that they change their behavior. You do not engage in a dramatic, shouting argument to prove a point. You simply execute the silent exit. The door slam. You slowly stop replying to messages. You decline invitations. You fade into the background until you are entirely forgotten. To the outside world, this looks ruthless and cold. It looks like you dispose of people easily. But the truth is the exact opposite. You care so intensely, and you absorb so much of their emotional weight that you literally cannot sustain the connection anymore. You cut them off to save yourself from drowning. There is a hidden grief in this pattern that very few people understand. You do not actually want to be entirely alone. You desperately crave deep, authentic connection. You want to be known, to be seen, to exist in a space where you do not have to constantly translate your existence. But the profound tension of your life is that your greatest gift and your heaviest burden are the exact same mechanism. The same traumatic intelligence that makes you a brilliant observer is what makes you an exhausted participant. You can read their souls, anticipate their fears, and offer them the exact comfort they need. But that same X-ray vision means you cannot ignore the shadows. You register the exact moment someone's affection becomes conditional. You understand everyone, but you have carefully constructed a life where very few people are allowed to understand you. Recognizing this pattern of profound withdrawal is a vital step in understanding your own survival mechanisms. Though it is important to remember that this is an observation of lived experience, not a formal clinical diagnosis. When your cognitive resources are depleted, the physical world becomes overwhelmingly loud. The hum of the refrigerator, the chaotic overlapping voices in a cafe. The only cure for this physical overstimulation is an environment that demands absolutely nothing from your nervous system. This is why you find such profound comfort in environments where you are entirely unobserved. Driving alone at night, sitting in a quiet room while the rest of the house sleeps. In these moments, you do not have to perform, predict, or protect. The isolation that society calls a problem is actually your deepest medicine. The glowing smartphone on the coffee table finally stops buzzing. The screen dims, and the room returns to darkness. You do not have to apologize for needing the silence. You do not have to force yourself to be accessible to a world that drains your bones. There will be a time for connection, but it does not have to be today. Tonight, you can just let the room be quiet, and you can finally stop reading the shadows.